Show don't stop, y'all. Someone got me a little something to eat. All my family down in Georgia, man. You know, they be watching, they be supporting this channel a lot. Shout out to my cousin and her husband, Gina and Tim. We be rocking out, man. We be thousands of miles away, but it be like, and you know how you got that family where you ain't never met them, but you met them one time and you feel like you've known them forever. And I'm kind of like, you know, like there are very few people I will leave my kids to, but if I had to leave my kids, I'd leave them to them. I don't let anybody just take my kids and stuff like that, man. But I will leave them to my cousins down, my two cousins down there, or my cousin and her husband down there. Like if something happened to me, I will leave my son to them, like, cause I know that they gonna make sure he all right. He gonna be raised correctly. But anyway, we were just talking about, and this gonna be a discussion forever. Like I said, man, centers, bro, they represent the FBA. They represent the foundationals heavy. They really stood on American history, and you know, for those that ain't seen it, they captured African history too before we got here on this American plantation. Before we got here, you know, they threw that in there too, so he covered it. Anyway, I really don't want for folks that ain't seen it. It's a great American story. It's a great American story, and it's a discussion that you're going to be able to have about the Delta Blues and how black folks were not given their due, and that was really the beginning of blues. But I don't want to give any more. I don't want to give any more because this is something you could see 4-5 times to get all these kind of Easter eggs. But anyway, we gonna keep it going. I'm looking at a couple different interfaces, and I think I released those last 2 videos. So this is gonna be like a digital journal / little mini story time real quick, and I'm gonna try to do some more. Even though they said the air quality is supposed to be kind of janky because of the wildfires up here. We got some wildfires up north, and I got the tinfoil hat on. I don't know. I just find it interesting, but you know, these wildfires, they happen. I think some of the wildfires, people have started them. I have no proof of that, so I can't put my capoeira martial arts on. But this is a quick little story time. Oh yeah, back to the interface anyway. But so I'm looking at a couple different little interfaces, and I might just get a little small one just for now, because once I get what I want to set up. Once I move, I want to get a whole setup. I'm talking about every single piece of interface is going to be the top-notch quality. But I don't want to just get little small bits and pieces that cost kind of a lot. I want to, you know what I'm saying? I want to give y'all a full experience once I settle down where I want to be. Right now, I'm in the dusty basement. You know what I'm saying? So, because there's all kinds of different things. So, you know, but I still want to give y'all, but the quality here on this Apple, I'm still amazed. I got 11 or a 12, I think it is. And the quality, I'm still shook. And I'm an IT person. I'm still shook at the quality that I get from this little 11 or 12. I don't want the 16. I don't want the 16. I think that this is beautiful. I think it's the best. It's crazy, and they say it gets better. So, this story's about, this is like an old story time, going back kind of pre-IT, before I was building computers and stuff. I was like in the 6th, 7th grade. Remember, I was telling you I went to Sullivan from the 6th grade, and I'll show you a picture of what the building looks. It kind of looks like a prison, but I went there from 3rd grade to 8th grade. Okay, I went there from 3rd grade to 8th grade, and you know, I had this one dude, and I think he was kind of in the sunken place because he grew up with with white parents. He was from the Virgin Islands, right? And he brag about not the Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands. So they got this little dude from the Cayman Islands. He got adopted by white parents. They had all kinds of parrots and macaws, and he used to talk about, these parrots. And this macaw, it could break your hand because they eat nuts and stuff like that. It's like a big parrot. It's called a macaw or a macaw, or it's called a macaw. And so this macaw, he'd have it, and they'd have a rabbit, and they had all these parrots. They had a cockatoo. They had all these expensive exotic animals and stuff like that. And so his name was Joe. Joe, I think he was a little off, or something was up. So you had Joe, he was adopted, and then he had 2 sisters. Now I think one of them was his biological, I'm not sure, but their parents from the Cayman Islands kind of gave them away or something like that. It was weird. I don't know. They kind of told me. So I thought maybe something may have happened in that house. I don't know, but I just thought it was a little weird. Now, Joe, he was in a sunken place, and his brother was kind of in the sunken place, but his brother could kind of fight. His brother was LGBT, and that was the first time we seen a gay person in school, like a kid that was like, he was flamboyant, like he was just out with it. Now, he wasn't messing with the other kids or whatever, but you could tell the way he was acting. He was real sassy, and he was this real black sassy nigga. He was real dark. He was just big and sassy, and he'd have a slick mouth, and he'd always be talking shit. And I'd be like, what happened to him? Because we were young. We were like we weren't even 14. We weren't even in high school yet. So I'm trying to figure out what happened to this boy when he was staying with these white folks. So Joe was good at drawing. I'm talking about, I think I still might have those pictures. I had a picture. I'm about to go look at that. I'm gonna go try to find it and get and show y'all. I think I still got that book. I hope got that book. But basically, me and him were working on a comic. I could write. Joe couldn't read or write very well, but he could draw, and I could write. And he was trying to show me how to draw. But he was just kind of weird. Like, he wasn't your typical black kid. He came from the Cayman Islands, which is, I think, a part of the Caribbean or something like that. He's from them islands, so he's one of them Negroes. So his mind was just, he didn't have any black culture growing up in the household he had. Now, he had all the nice stuff. He had the lunchbox. He didn't get the EBT, you know what I'm saying? Because they stayed. I'm trying to figure out where they stayed. I'm gonna take a story time, and I'm gonna show y'all where he stayed. It was kind of close. If you go down by Franklin, was it more off a lake or more off Franklin? They stayed where the bridge, where Lake Street brings you to St. Paul, or back towards Matthews Park kind of area. To my knowledge, I can't remember. But I remember one time I went over his house. My parents allowed me to go over there. They seen the pictures that Joe had. That was one of the few times they let me go over his house. It was between 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And we had hot dogs. And they had the parrots and all this stuff. So I'm poking at the parrots and all this, and the parrots are squawking, So they like, man, this thing will bite your hand if it don't know you. And so the white mom, you could tell she was kind of in control. The black, or his dad, the white dad, he had this cane, kind of tall, not as stern, but the mom was like, I'm trying to think of how I could say how she was. Not like the Misery Woman, Kathy Bates or whatever, like, she just had this, you could tell she was kind of running that show. It felt like she was kind of running that show. So he used to say, how we say the N-word with the GA and stuff, like he would say it with the ER. So I'm like, he would do stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of be like, man, bro, like, so he like I say, he was in the sunken place. He was in the sunken place. And you know, I had a homie called Phil. Phil's gonna try to dispute this. They would take Joe's lunch like it was jail. They would take one day they took Joe's lunch. They told him to hand it over, and he handed his lunch over. They would take Joe's lunch all through 6th and 7th grade. He'd have his carrots, because I used to like the carrots, and then he'd have chips or pretzels. He had carrots, he had pretzels, and he'd have a sandwich. So they would take his lunch every day, and I told you, I said, bro, you got to fight back. Phil used to bully him. Phil would be bullying niggas and shit like that. So, you know, but only if you let him. So every time Joe knew, every time he came to the lunch table, he knew to give Phil's lunch. You know, to give him the lunch, and Phil would have him dilly it out. It'd be him, and it'd be Phil had like a crew, so they come up like it was some like it was some prison shit. Hey, Joe, what you got, man? You know, so his juice box. Like this happened from 6th to 8th grade, all that. And so now I'm telling Joe, and Joe wasn't like a real little dude. He had a big ass head, but you know, he was big enough to defend himself. I'm like, Joe, you gonna have to tell them no. Well, man, you know, and all this thing, oh, you know, he's whining and all this here. And so he don't want to defend himself. So I said, well, I'm not going to defend you. So I just let him do it. So one day, Phil says, oh, Derek likes pretzels. Here you go. So he throws Joe's pretzels. Joe tries to reach for his pretzels back. And he said, well, Joe, you're going to get beat up. Leave him alone. So I'm holding the pretzels, and I'm like, man, Joe, I don't want to take your pretzels, man. It's okay, man. So I said, all right. So I go to Phil one day. I said, because Phil used to ride my bus. He be on Cedar. We go through Cedar Riverside. I be over there on River Bluff. I got to go up the hill, up to Cedar Riverside, and then we stop at maybe a few more places towards the Seward neighborhood. It wasn't a ton of stops from Ann Sullivan, or from Cedar Riverside to Ann Sullivan. It wasn't a ton. It wasn't a whole, it was a few off of 6th Street, and then we go up to Seward, and it wasn't a whole bunch of stops. Because if you were in the Seward neighborhood, you could walk to Ann Sullivan. You could be a walker. If you're within a mile, you could walk. It wasn't, you know, there was a lot of walkers, and I used to want to live over there because I like to walk. I always want to walk to school. We stayed in Cedar Riverside. That would have been, you could walk, but that's a hell of a walk, especially in the winter. Yeah, you ain't gonna want to walk from Cedar Riverside, especially River Bluff. That is a hell of a walk. From River Bluff all the way to Sullivan or Seward, you ain't gonna make it. It's too damn cold. That's not walking distance. But if you stay within a couple blocks of Sullivan or Seward, Sullivan is only about maybe what? Let me see. Is it 6 blocks from Seward? 8, maybe 9 at the most, or something like that. But actually less than that, because you could take that one street, that same street that goes down McDonald's on Seward, and then you be at Matthews Park. So, but like I say, we went to Seward from kindergarten to 2nd grade, transferred to Sullivan from 3rd to 8th. They was taking Joe's lunch from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, faithfully. And they figured, well, you know, his parents got some money. So, you know, like I say, they if you was a black student, if the other students are trying to bully you, white or black, they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt, you black, because they figure, well, you got black parents, you ain't going to be able to come home talking about you bullied. Your parents is going to get on your behind and tell you, you know, they'll whip your ass if you don't whip theirs. So, but with Joe, he's just going to accept it. He got white parents. His parents ain't going to tell him to fight back, which is ironic because how vitriolic his mom had like a real nasty attitude. You would have thought that she would have been like, okay, nigga, fight back. He ain't fight back. He had a sister named Rachel. Now, Rachel was black. She sounded like a black woman. I don't know if she got adopted later, but Rachel sounded like a sister. And she always sounded like a sister. So maybe, I don't think Rachel was from the islands. I think she was a foundational. I think she was a freedman. I don't think she was from the islands. I think Joe's brother Isaac was, and he was. But Rachel didn't sound like them. So maybe she was adopted later or whatever the case may be. So Rachel wasn't going. Yeah, you wasn't going to be able to play with Rachel. If you do something to Rachel, she didn't, I never seen her with no fights or whatever the case may be. But, later on, I think she kind of got strung out or something like that. Some of us seen her or whatever, but you know, you know, like the last time I seen her, she was different. She looked like she was for the streets because she was ready. I don't know, but later on, I think she got strung out or something like that. But Joe, I went to feel like, hey man, and I was still kind of into computers and stuff like that because I was always going to the computer lab because that's where Ann Sullivan is when I first had my first Apple Mac, getting that Apple Mac experience. So I learned with Apple early, very, very early. I learned actually more so on Macintosh than dealing with PCs. I started to own a PC later. My first computer was a Macintosh because my dad was with the Flim Flam and he brought home a Macintosh. This is a very expensive Macintosh, so he just didn't know what to do with it. There was no internet, no nothing. We didn't even have a printer, so I don't know what he intended on doing. So I go to Phil and I'm like, hey man, I want them pretzels. How about y'all stop bullying them and I get the pretzels? Battery getting low. How about y'all stop bullying them and I get the pretzels? So Joe acquiesced. They were already taking his stuff. So I pulled Phil to the side and I said, look, man, Joe's the homie. Man, y'all, why don't you lay off him a little bit? So he was like, well, we gonna get somebody, Joe. That nigga got money and he lame. If you got money if you had parents that, and I know it sounds bad, but if you had parents and you didn't stand up for yourself at school and your parents had money and they knew you had money, we coming from Cedar Riverside and River Bluff, yeah, they gonna get you. Give it up. It wasn't right. I'm just saying that's what happened. If you stood for yourself, if you stand, you're good. If you don't stand, you giving it up until somebody else steps in your favor. So I'm like, hey Joe, look, they gonna take your lunch all the time. Yeah, I like pretzels. My parents gonna buy me pretzels. I used to love pretzels. I never had pretzels when I was a kid, but they take his pretzels and give them to me. And I'd be like, man, I don't want to take your pretzels. He's like, man, just go ahead, man. So I said, look, I'm going to make it look better. Joe, you give me the pretzels and I'll tell them what they can't take. I'll tell them what they can't take. So I go to Phil and his homies. I said, look, Joe's scared, man. Lay off him a little bit. He's talking about giving me the pretzels. Just lay off him. So they weren't really taking his stuff no more. Now he just started kind of giving his stuff. And so eventually we start hanging out. He's drawing the pictures and stuff like that. Now keep in mind, 6th grade, it was pretty dead. You're just kind of getting to know people. We had 7th and 8th grade. And check this out. There was this dark-skinned dude, kind of tall. His name was Willie. Or not Willie, but damn, I don't remember his name. But he used to always have an uncombed, unkept head. He looked like some nigga. He looked like Kunta from Roots. His head was always looking crazy. There was this one dude. Turned out into being a beast. I think he's being a beast. I think he's doing life. His name was Chiron. Chiron was in, I think, 7th or 8th grade. He wasn't there long. He was always into some shit. Chiron, to my knowledge, I had to ask my homie, but Chiron eventually, from what I hear, Chiron was somebody in the streets that wasn't to be played with. I think right now he's doing life, or he could become a home. But he was with Pistol Play, allegedly. Well, shit, it's fucking documented. So anyway, but he had a lazy eye. Always talking shit. Skinny, little, tall, black nigga. Always talking shit. We got into it at the stairway one time. Everybody was acting scared of him. We got into it at the stairway one time because he tried to knock my books over or something like that. So we was almost getting ready to fight. And he, you know, I'm kind of short and stocky, but he's like skinny. You know what I'm saying? So I'm kind of like, I'm going to beat this dude's ass. I really didn't know too much about him or whatever, but eventually they said he became a beast. But I never forgot him because he had a lazy eye. But he was afraid of fighting some dudes that was bigger than him. I wasn't. But I remember that, and I don't remember too much. I think he did something in school or whatever like that. Because if you was like a problem child in the regular schools, they'll ship you off to alternative school or whatever like that. So we would get some of the kids sometimes that be acting a fool at different schools, but they start acting a fool at Ann Sullivan and then they'll leave. And some of these dudes went on to become hitters in the streets and dudes that was feared in the streets, or dudes that was making money trapping and doing what, you know what I'm saying? So they became names in Minneapolis. So now back to Joe. Joe was the one I told y'all that was scared to go to Valley Fair, and I fought Danny because Joe was saying, man, I'm not going to Valley Fair. Joe was on the list. He was gonna go, but he was on the list. They thought Joe was lame, so they was gonna beat Joe up and probably take his money, because Joe was gonna come to Valley Fair every year with $100. So they was gonna kind of like extort Joe. But Joe was hanging out with me, so they probably figured, well, I can't extort Joe because I'm with DP. And that's another name. A substitute teacher gave me the name DP. That's how I got the name DP. I always had the answers. I'd be raising my hands. He said, what's the answer, DP? He was a substitute teacher. And the teacher, he was super cool. We were sad he left. Always used to have some white crack spitting in his mouth whenever he talks. What's the answer, DP? And then he's a white man with the George Jefferson. He was a white man, but he had the George Jefferson. And he walked with a gimp. One of his feet was he was disabled. So he walked with a gimp. He had the white, and I was like, man, this dude don't wipe his mouth. What's the answer, DP? You know, so they be roasting on him, but he was super cool. Something happened to one of our main teachers, and we had dude for like damn near like a year, or like a whole year or whatever. So it was cool. That was like maybe 7th grade, maybe, I don't know what it was. But man, Ann Sullivan, I wish I could go into Ann Sullivan and show y'all what it looks like. It do kind of look like a prison. The tiers, I call them tiers. It looked like tiers, like they shaped it like a damn juvenile facility. If you look South High and all that, my homie's like, man, no, it didn't. I said, yes, they started South High. They made it like a fortress because there was civil unrest at South High. And they thought people were going to turn up and break the windows compared to the old South High building. The old South High building doesn't look like the new South High building of the 70s and 80s. You see what I'm saying? So that was the same class when Joe was saying, I'm not going to Valley Fair. And the white boy Danny said, you ain't going to Valley Fair because you a PUSS. You know what I'm saying? And so he tried to say that about me too. And that's when I stood up and we got down. So 7th and 8th grade was a little smoother for me far as students, because I had a reputation. I had 2 fights. I got suspended. 6th grade, I didn't have any fights. So, and 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, you know, you're not really having a bunch of fights like that. You're just learning and stuff like that. So, you know, I don't recall having, I don't even remember much of 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, but I remember 6th, 7th, and 8th. You know, those are notable years. 6th grade, you didn't have no fights because you're still learning your friends. And you still got old friends from Seward. You see what I'm saying? You still got old friends from Seward. So, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, you know, I think Pee Wee and Selena, I think Selena and Pee Wee, Sharon and them, they went to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And Andre went to 6th, 7th grade. And Elliot, they was in Ann Sullivan too. And I think they went to Seward too. You know what I'm saying? Elliot, he does comedy. He comedy. He white dude who grew up around us, and he do comedy. So, you know, like I said, you know, it was a mixture of different kids that went there. You know what I'm saying? Nathaniel went to Sullivan. Bethel went to Sullivan. You know what I'm saying? We had, so I still remember a lot of them guys. You know what I'm saying? I still see them, and they still, you know, so I see them still every now and then. You know, so now, yeah, Joe be drawing. So we was coming up with a comic book, and I think I got that book. I'm gonna try to find that book. But we was coming up with a comic book. I'm quite sure that I have it somewhere. I just don't know where it's at. But we were coming up with a comic book, man. And I was gonna draw. Eventually he wrote a book of just pictures. And I start writing the comic, because that's another thing I forgot y'all to tell y'all about. I used to be in the comics real big, so I would have the Maximum Carnage Spider-Man comics, and a teacher took my Fatal Attraction. I still want to get that comic. I don't know why, but it's called Fatal Attraction, when Magneto pulled the adamantium out of Wolverine. You see what I'm saying? That came from that comic book. So when you see the new X-Men, Wolverine tried to go head to head with Magneto. It didn't go very well. But Wolverine's a beast. He ain't gonna turn nothing down. So, but we were into comics around that time, and we were into Transformers Beast Wars. That was a big thing back then. We used to watch Beast Wars. Sometimes I would collect the little things because I had them before I went to California before I went to 9th grade. I had a collection of those. But I felt like I was getting too old for them, so I think I gave them to Joe, or I don't know. I think I gave them to Joe. I think I sold them all to Joe because I had the ones that weren't coming out no more. I had all the Beast Wars. I had like 10 of them, but I was kind of getting older, and I knew I really couldn't go into 9th grade talking about Beast Wars. The sisters was not really gonna have that. They gonna be like, nigga, I ain't trying to hear no Beast Wars. What's up with them draws? You see what I'm saying? That's what 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, that's what folks was thinking about. They ain't trying to hear about no Beast Wars and video games. And I had to have some other students, once, especially I got to 9th grade, some of my homies had to pull me to the side like, bro, they don't really want to hear about, the sisters ain't really trying to hear nothing about no video games like that, bro. Like, you know, and I kind of be into them. One of my homies, I remember when Phil told me, he said, bro, you knock something down, you ain't trying to hear nothing. You ain't gonna give a damn about no video games. And lo and behold, yeah, that was over with. He said, once you get a piece, nigga, you ain't gonna think nothing about no video games. You ain't gonna care about it or nothing because the women ain't even gonna mention it. They ain't really, because I went to school one time talking about some of the moves I knew how to do. I think with PlayStation, it was back DDXY. It was a game called Nightmare Creatures, and there was a sister that had the game at home, and I'm asking how to do a move. She trying to holler, and I'm up here talking about how to do the move, how to do like a double-edged sword back, you know, something. This is 9th grade, so the sister's looking at me, and she fine and thick, built up. And I'm asking her how to do a move on a video game. And she tells me to move because she played it at home. But she said, but anyway, enough about the game. I'm still going on about the game. She looking at me like, she walked off. I said, I just want to talk about the game. She looking at me like, I'm trying to talk about something else. And my homies, some of my guys, they get busting up laughing like, nigga, no more video games, bro. No more video games. You supposed to be getting your player on. They don't want to hear about no games. They don't want to hear about no damn video games. They don't. And I had to come to learn that, you know, say that's a thing. Now, dudes might talk about Madden and Live and all that kind of stuff, you know, but going to 9th grade, 97, 98, no, man. They not trying to hear about no video games. These sisters are trying to see what kind of shoes you got on, and they trying to get your number and all that. And that was another thing coming into 9th grade. 6th, 7th, 8th grade, there was still people talking on the phone and hollering, but 9th grade on up, yeah, that's where you got your confidence as far as hollering at the ladies. So that was another thing. Me and Joe really couldn't hang out no more because I'm starting to hang around a different group of friends. I'm starting to mature to a different level. So like, I remember one time he came by my house, and that might have been like 7th, 8th grade or whatever. And, you know, folks in the neighborhood were kind of looking at him like, you know, what's up with this dude? You see what I'm saying? And it was my homie, but he just kept doing saying little goofy stuff and just being goofy. And so, you know, now later on, I seen him when I might have been 18, 19. So the Joe that knew me when I was in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I wasn't that person anymore. I'm interested in Chevy Caprices and Blades and 8-Ball and MJG and, you know what I'm saying, trying to, you know, maybe go into the studio with some of my homies and stuff. And now I'm smoking and, you know what I'm saying, and now we getting into little scuffles around the neighborhood. And then, you know, eventually, and then I think I might have seen him around 19, 20, 21, or, you know, when we done with high school or whatever. So I seen him kind of walking down the street and this, that, and the third, or, you know, and so, you know, he's like, hey, Derek, hey, you know, he's still on that kind of, and I don't know if he was a little slow, but he's still kind of on that little, you know, that little Ace Ventura type shit. He was like that. He was like a black dude with on some Jim Carrey kind of, yay, you know, like just goofy. And I thought maybe he was a little slow or something, but he was still that, you know, little Three Musketeer, you know, little top hat, you know what I'm saying, Christmas Carol. Hey, you know, had that little, yeah, he used to kind of walk like that, like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, you're not really thinking like, but now you going into 19, 20, 21, and he's still kind of just walking down, he was walking down Franklin or somewhere, and he seen me, hey, Derek, hey. That's how he was talking. And I'm not hanging with that kind of crowd. You see what I'm saying? So for me, I couldn't really, you know, I'm trying to go smoke something. I'm trying to go sell my mixtapes. I'm trying to go to the studio. I'm out here hanging out with gangbanging niggas and all kind of shit. Like, you know, I'm different. My crowd is different. A lot of my friends is hustling and serving and getting into fights and shootouts at the club and, you know, all kind of shit. That's the crowd that I'm kind of dealing with a little bit. I'm dealing with a more dangerous crowd. So me and him, he's talking about, yeah, man, let's go play with Beast Wars and stuff. I'm like, oh no, like that, we're not gonna be able to, you know. And he must have had my number one time. He called me, hey, and I'm like, and he's trying to find out what's going on. But the conversation, me transitioning to a different person, my crowd is different. I couldn't even bring him around. I couldn't go over north and bring him around certain people. You know, I can't even bring you around. I can't hang. And if I'm trying to holler at some females, they're gonna be like, what's up with your guy? Like, you know, I'm not gonna be able to hang around you like that. It's just something I'm not gonna be able to do. So, you know, that's my story on Joe, man. Hopefully Joe's okay. But yeah, that was my Joe story time, man. And I had a couple friends like that, but not to that degree. But my whole thing is that was one piece of my life that I was gonna start doing comic book production. And I'm gonna try to find that comic book and show y'all what I was gonna do. And I'm gonna see if I can reproduce that. For, like, you know, the true supporters that's interested in, I'm gonna see if I could get that photocopied and reproduced or something like that and make it into like a little book and just call it, you know, the Being Black and IT comic book. Maybe somebody could take it. Maybe I could set something up where I could make an intellectual property and share it, where black folks that want to create a comic book and take my story, you can have it.